So where you're paying $10 for a keyword nationally, Larry in the white van in Wichita, Kansas is paying $2 for that exact word. So it's an 80% cost savings getting, to and through Larry to his marketplace.
Welcome to the Modern Marketing Engine podcast, hosted by Bernie Borges. This is the podcast for the modern marketer who wants to hear from their peers in the trenches and the occasional analyst or rockstar influencer, sharing strategies and tactics about what's working in modern marketing. Be sure to listen to the end of each episode for Bernie's summary and takeaways so you can plan your next move in your own modern marketing journey.
Hey there, welcome to episode 254 of the Modern Marketing Engine podcast. I'm Bernie Borges, CMO of Ingresso, and your host. Hey, thanks for listening. Hey, my guest on this episode is Jay McBain, Principal Analyst, Channel Partnerships and Alliances at Forrester. Hey, Jay, welcome to the Modern Marketing Engine podcast.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Absolutely. Well, we recently had you on our other podcast here at Ingresso, Selling with Social. You and Mario on episode 115 talked about leveraging channel sales. So I wanted to invite you on our Modern Marketing Engine podcast, Jay, to talk about channel marketing, but of course through the marketing lens. So what we've teed up for the listener today is to talk about what you call the third stage for sales and marketing leaders, which is through channel marketing. And so you've got a blog post that I'm going to link up in our show notes page for the listener. And just to kind of tee up the topic here, it really stems from the fact that sales and marketing leaders across all industries have really done a ton of automation, right? So the whole art of marketing is no longer an art. It's a science. We can't go back to the old back of the napkin ways, as you say. And you point out in your article that with 75% of world trade flowing indirectly, it's time for channels and partnerships and alliances to also be enabled with the same level of passion and what you call the third stage in sales and marketing transformation, and that is through channel marketing automation, otherwise called TCMA. And that is what we're going to talk about here today, Jay. So before we get into TCMA, why don't you give my listener a little bit of background? Tell us a little bit about Forrester for those that may not be familiar with the organization, and then your role there at Forrester as a principal analyst.
Yeah, sure. So Forrester is pretty well known. It's one of the largest research and analyst firms in the world. I actually work in a B2B marketing group. So that's how closely knit the channel is with marketing. So it's great to be talking about you today. I've spent 25 years in channels, running channels for companies like IBM and Lenovo. I started my own channel software company with some AI and mobility technology. I was a founder and CEO for 6 years. And then 2 years ago, I took over the channel partnerships and alliances practice globally across every industry at Forrester.
Okay, fantastic. So Jay, let's get into it then. Through channel marketing automation, the acronym is TCMA. Why don't we begin with, what is it? Let's put a definition behind this. We can't call it a TLA, 3-letter acronym. It's a 4-letter acronym. What is through channel marketing automation?
Yeah, I think the world's run out of 3-letter acronyms. So it's like URLs now. We have to go to 4-letter acronyms. But it's similar in some ways to marketing automation. We follow Marketo and Pardot and Eloqua and HubSpot and Acton and the other companies, what they do. But it's actually the marketing you do to, through, and with channel partners. And channel partners differ in each of the 27 industries. So in the automobile industry, it's the dealers. In the finance industry, it's the advisors, insurance adjusters, and pharmaceutical reps. You've got in technology, it's VARs, resellers, MSPs. The names change or the taxonomy changes as you change industry, but the actual way that you market to, through, and with them is through a set of tools. And there's about 35 companies today that make TCMA, through channel marketing automation, software to make this all work.
Okay, so you're really kind of drawing a correlation to the HubSpots and the Marketos of the world that are more general horizontal, whereas this marketing automation is focused specifically on channels and partnerships.
Yeah, and to make a delineation there, the companies like Marketo and Eloqua actually use vendors for TCMA. They don't use their own tools because there's some differences. When you take, for example, email, social, search, syndicated content, and all of these different tool sets, and there's a level of governance, security, multi-tenant. You've got other players involved, like digital agencies at scale. It's a different set of technologies that allow you to do that across distributed or local marketing than you would do that in your own direct marketing strategy.
Let's unpack that a little bit, Jay. Why is it different? I mean, one of the questions I jotted down for our discussion is why is TCMA even a thing? Why do we need marketing automation specialized for the whole world of going through a channel?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, and by the way, I talk to all the big marketing automation companies every month, and their first question is, why can't we just do a couple of changes to our own platform to be able to do it at a different level of scale? And after the conversation ends, after 30 minutes, it's usually another million lines of code and pretty complex. So the differences are this. So if you look at, we'll just make up one channel, which is Microsoft, which runs the biggest channel in the world. They have 400,000 partners. They have 7,500 new partners that sign up every month. So they are going to run a campaign, and it's going to be a campaign that includes email, includes some SEO, includes some social postings, includes some syndicated content and some inbound type of work. So, a campaign that you'd run through marketing automation. But they're then going to replicate this 400,000 times. And then in this, you've got thousands. There's 108,000 digital agencies, by the way. And those 108,000 companies, a good percentage of them are going to be the ones doing it for these local partners. Because 2/3 of these partners don't have the marketing skill, they don't have the wherewithal, they don't have the resources, the will. I mean, for a bunch of reasons, they don't want to do it. So 66% of them want it done on behalf of them or for them. So this is where there's other agencies that become involved. The other difference is when you get into your local partners, the ones that are in each town and city and the ones driving the white vans, you'll find out that they have different relationships with the customer. They call on a different type of buyer. They call on a different sub-industry, 297 sub-industries. They call in obviously different geographies with different rules and different compliance and regulation, legislation around what you can do. They call on different size and sector and segment of customers. They have different skill sets. So in Microsoft case, there's 40 different layers of the tech stack. Of their partners have, skills in each of those 40 areas. So you're not just running a singular campaign across 400,000 partners. You're running 400,000 individualized campaigns based on those 5 vectors. So now you're in a world of permutations and combinations that your traditional marketing automation is just not set up to do.
So what I'm hearing then in your description there, Jay, is that there's a level of complexity that is beyond the traditional horizontal marketing automation, again, the Marketos, HubSpots, Eloquas of the world. And that level of complexity, when you get into the factors that make up channel partners and the ability for those campaigns to be scaled and replicated, it requires essentially another product, is what I think I'm hearing you say.
Correct. The tool set underneath, the ability to send out emails or the ability to, do this social posting and things and track it all and measure it all and everything else is similar. But when you look at these permutations, it takes a different type of product. So on top of the complexity, you also have the governance and the security and the compliance, to be able to do that at that level of scale. Because, a company like Microsoft wants to make sure that these 400,000 campaigns adhere to their corporate branding guidelines, which I think is 300 pages long. They don't want somebody in Wichita, Kansas and Northern Germany and, making up their own stuff. It's got to feel and look like a Microsoft campaign to and through and with that partner. So again, a human can't go in and be in the middle of this and approve 400,000 campaigns. There's a level of AI, there's a level of workflow and automation that's built in that allows you to do it at this level of scale.
So, Jay, here's what I'm thinking. Many companies in many different industries have an element of distribution that is indirect, meaning they may have a direct sales team, whatever that number is, could be 10, could be 100, could be 1,000, whatever. And then they also have an indirect, a channel, what they call channels, partners, alliances, right? Whatever the vernacular is. But they may not be exclusive, like the auto industry sells exclusively through dealerships, unless you're Tesla. So what about the hybrid model, which is more, I think, the norm than the exception? How do those companies, if they're already using a Marketo, kind of a marketing automation, and indirect is an element of their distribution channel, to what extent do they need TCMA?
Yeah, it's a great question. And if I look back over 100 years, you used auto as a good example. Last time you bought a TV was from a retailer. Last time you bought a jar of peanut butter was from a grocer. Everything in your personal, or most things in your professional life as well, run through channels. That's 75% of world GDP runs indirectly. And if I look back over organizationally, almost every company in the world runs their channel as a silo. And so that silo actually is almost self-funding and self-fulfilling. So it has a channel chief, which looks like a CEO, and that person has reporting to them channel sales, channel marketing, channel finance, channel operations. So they kind of look like a general manager of their own thing. So when you go to Ford or Chevy, the people that are running the dealerships are separate from the people that are running global marketing. And this goes for Microsoft, it goes for the big pharmaceutical companies, it goes for everyone. And you're kind of leading to the answer, which is we need to break down these walls. The same way that marketing automation and ABM kind of broke down the walls of sales and marketing over the last 20 years. The third stage, the third element of this is getting this 75% of your business also into this sales and marketing engine and having all three of those, for example, reporting into a CRO.
So your point then is that it needs to be integrated into the org chart, to your last comment, reporting directly into the chief revenue officer and not be siloed. Is that what you're saying?
Correct. And then the technology stack, there is a sales stack. We know the MarTech stack with 7,000 logos on it. I am the author of the channel stack, which has 106 logos. We can include that link as well afterwards. And the idea is each of these parts of the organization are going to have very defined technology that allows them to do what they do. I'm not sure that the marketing automation platforms today are willing, able, or motivated to go add the million lines of code necessary to create this indirect marketing platform. So there could be, and there is, a big level of mergers and acquisitions. What's really interesting about this third stage is that 20 years ago, a lot of people don't know when Salesforce, really started, there was over 300 CRM companies. And today, there's a handful of winners. 10 years ago, there was 150 marketing automation companies. And we've rattled off kind of the 5 winners already. But today, I generate a list of 106 channel companies who are trying to really represent this third stage, which is the indirect side. And I believe there's going to be 4 or 5 winners when we look back 10 years from now.
Okay. And why? Why do you see that sort of consolidation happening?
Well, it's a natural thing in the marketplace. It's not of value to customers to have a bunch of point solutions and be in a world that you're piecing together 7,000 things to run a task. Business tends to compress and consolidate, and some of the technology becomes commoditized, and you start to get a more foundational layer. So that's what CRM became 20 years ago. There is a ton of sales enablement technology on top of it. Salesforce reports that the average customer buys 6 other things after buying their CRM on the App Exchange. Same thing with marketing automation. You may start with Marketo or Eloqua or Pardot, but you'll end up adding, 6 or 7 layers on top of it to make it work. And in the channel world, we're not there yet. There's a PRM layer, which is partner relationship management. There's the TCMA layer, which we're talking about now through channel marketing. But there's also channel incentives, channel finance, channel data, channel enablement. There's 6 different categories. And there really isn't a horizontal piece today, which through mergers and acquisitions, a ton of money coming in through Wall Street, we're starting to see some of these horizontal winners taking shape.
So channel relationship management, isn't that also a CRM acronym?
It is PRM as compared to CRM.
Okay. Partner relationship management. Okay, got it.
Yeah.
It's a good way to avoid CRM then instead of channel relationship management. Okay.
But what's interesting is when you have this siloed organization and you run, for example, channel sales, you are not aligned at all usually with the direct sales side of the organization. So while, CRM may be your customer of record, your database of record, you run a PRM that does all the processing on top of that. The opportunity management, the deal registrations, all the things you need to do in indirect sales and have that feed into that customer record, but you don't do it in Salesforce itself.
Okay, interesting. We'll be back in just a moment with the rest of my conversation with Jay McBain. We've surveyed 862 B2B sales reps across 5 industries to measure their digital selling skills. The results? Despite the digital age that we live and work in, most sales professionals lack the basic skills to find, engage, and connect on LinkedIn with people that they need to meet to start more sales conversations. Get the Vengresso State of Digital Selling with LinkedIn 2019 report to learn how sales professionals stack up on requisite modern selling skills. You'll also learn how you can arrange to get your own custom digital selling benchmark report for your sales team. To get the State of Digital Selling with LinkedIn 2019 report, go to stateofdigitalselling.com. So let's talk about some of the success factors, because if you look at traditional marketing automation, I think because it's a robust or mature enough market segment or industry segment, we can kind of rattle off, some of the success factors in marketing automation. So as it relates to TCMA, how would you define, without a long list that, might take an hour, right? How would you kind of provide a highlight or an overview of the success factors in implementing TCMA?
The other thing TCMA has that marketing automation doesn't is a financial piece. Because in most cases, almost all cases, the vendor or the brand is funding the marketing that the local business is doing. So there needs to be a budgeting and financial mechanism there, which is another acronym, MDF, Market Development Funds, are managed by the vendor, and they're paid out as a percentage of sales or a number of different algorithms. But that financial element, and for companies that have large channels, it can ring into the billions of dollars. I mean, this is not a small element. It can be upwards of 1% to 2% of top line sales. And if you're a Fortune 500 company, that's a significant payout to third parties. Hence the proof of performance, hence the governance, hence all this stuff to make sure that there's not overpayments, fraud, and other things that's happening outside your firewall. The success factors, though, really, number one, are adoption. In some industries, some are different than others. But, for example, in technology industry, where you have 600,000 partners that are out there, the adoption rate right now is 17%. So there are companies that have money on the table, and they're leaving money on the table that would provide them the ability to run keywords in Google, would give them the ability to do the emails. And there's physical marketing as well. Print brochures, put up a billboard. I mean, there's money there that they're leaving on the table in 83% of the cases. So adoption is one of the key KPIs that companies are looking at. in terms of driving this.
Jay, when you say adoption, are you referring to adoption from the vendor who is selling through the channel, or are you referring to the channel partners that vendor is trying to sell through?
Yeah, I'm talking about the partner. So earlier I said that, 2/3 of them, 66%, are really not that skilled or that connected to this. So they would rather it done for them. And it's something that they're just leaving money on the table. It's there, the tools are there, even the digital agency is there to help them, but they're not executing. And that's in a majority of cases. So vendors, in many cases, are pulling their hair out, that they're offering up perhaps, millions or billions of dollars to go market. And these local businesses are passing it up. So that's a huge area of focus.
Okay. And through your lens as an analyst and as someone who is covering this topic and speaking on this topic, do you know the reasons? I mean, that's a big disconnect. Only 17% in technology. Why is it so low?
Yeah, every industry is slightly different, and there are better cases. There are industries like automotive, for example, is in the 90s. So really well adopted. But there's some franchise businesses. If you run a Dunkin' Donuts or a McDonald's or something, I mean, the percentages are much higher that you're going to use the corporate marketing and use it in your local restaurant and everything else. But I think the reasons, and there was a book written a couple of decades ago you might have read called The E-Myth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It was really written about these partners and how they get their start. If you're a technology person and you fixed your parents' computers and then you fixed your neighbors' computers, the word got out in the neighborhood and you got really busy. You got so busy, you hired a friend and you hired another friend. You skipped college and now you're running a multi-million-dollar computer business. Well, at no time did you ever pick up the marketing skills necessary, the sales skills, operation or finance skills. You're basically a technician running a multi-million-dollar company. And that was the E-Myth, where that's great when there's a lot of demand, but when things level off and you need to start to fuel demand, you don't have maybe the skills, you don't have the will, you basically ran your business based on referrals, you don't have this motivation, to really go do this, and it kind of hits you quick. That's part of the challenge, is motivating people and convincing them that marketing works when they've never had to use it.
So I find that a little bit perplexing, convincing partners that they need to do marketing, especially if the vendor is going to make it easy for them and give them market development funds, which is essentially, if not funding the marketing, at least giving them a significant portion. So what are you seeing as sort of the mindset? Why is there any resistance among the partner community in embracing this?
Well, I think if you've ran a business for 37 years in a certain way, if you look at certain markets, like, I talk technology, the 600,000 technology partners we're talking about, the average age of that owner principal is 58. So again, they may have started in the early 80s with IBM, later 80s with Compaq, or early 90s with Microsoft. But wherever they started, they're now 3 or 4 decades into this. And there's 40% of them are looking to retire.
So it's truly the E-Myth syndrome, as you point out.
It is. Basically, it is.
Yeah.
So as you start to look at younger Generation X or millennials, or even now Generation Z is entering, into the channel, this is changing. So the adoption is going higher based on demographics. And, this is going to continue to grow. And this is kind of where we're at in the third stage. As 75% of the channel will be millennials by 2024, this adoption is going to triple or quadruple in the next couple of years. We're really at the tipping point right now of the investments going in and obviously the partners accepting these investments to really drive their business at scale.
So for getting back to the hybrid model that I mentioned earlier, for my listener that might be in a hybrid model, again, they've got a direct sales force and they have a channel sales organization channel. I've seen companies have people in quote unquote partner marketing, partner sales, that kind of thing. What's your advice to them as it relates to through channel marketing automation?
Yeah, so a lot of people who have run these hybrid organizations, you look at the direct marketing side of their business. And by listening to you in this podcast and taking in all the resources and obviously the investments that have gone into these 7,000 companies that build tool sets, there's been so much science, like you mentioned earlier. I remember 10 years ago when people would walk around and say, 50% of your marketing dollars are wasted. You just don't know what 50%, ha ha ha. That doesn't happen anymore. But in the channel world, it still does. There isn't a science to it. We just know that there's 90 parts of a channel program, and here's what you do, and you try to put out all the fires and handle all the channel conflict. And at the end of the day, hopefully the channel, drives a lot of business. But if you're in a boardroom trying to compete for dollars, where the head of sales is in there with their tool set and they say, if you give me this much money, this is who I'm going to hire. This is how many phone calls we're going to make. This is how many, the marketing person then interrupts and says, well, here are my levers and dials. You give me that exact same amount of money, and here's the return I'm going to give you. Well, the channel person in this organization, if they spoke up and had that same levers and dials, I could do this through marketing automation. I could put more channel incentives. I could do this in terms of channel onboarding. I could recruit more of these type of partners. Here's my levers and dials. And right now, that answer would be a higher return on investment than probably both direct sales and marketing. It just hasn't been done. And there's not the tool set to really make that change.
Okay, terrific. I think, Jay, that is a great spot for us to do my little summary. I'm going to segue to that. This is where I kind of summarize the key points we discussed. And then I'll ask you to remark on the summary. If you want to add a point, by all means, feel free. And then we'll wrap it up with your social contact information and bring the podcast episode to a wrap. So we start a conversation with a brief reintroduction to my listener to your company, Forrester. Been around since the 80s, one of the largest research analyst organizations in the world. You work in B2B. You yourself have 25 years in channel. You've been with companies like IBM, Lenovo. You've founded your own channel marketing software company. And that's really a great background for this conversation through channel marketing automation. When we discuss what is it, it's marketing automation. However, it's to support marketing to, through, and with channel partners. You mentioned that we live in a world of 27 industries. I'm not even going to try to list them all, but we certainly know things like automotive and healthcare and grocery and technology and so forth. And in the world of through channel marketing automation, there's only 35 vendors. When you contrast that with the world of general marketing automation, you mentioned that 20 years ago, CRM had 300 companies. In marketing automation, 10 years ago, there were about 150, but not the case today. You said there's only 35. So it's really a different approach. You use the example of Microsoft, perhaps the largest channel marketing company in the world. They have 400,000 partners. They run a campaign each month for channel partners, and it needs to be replicated 400,000 times. They do that through digital agencies, and it really requires a very high level of sophistication. You mentioned the word permutations, and the ability to do that at scale really requires a TCMA approach. And we talked about sort of the background of channels. Often they're run in silos. You've got somebody who kind of heads it up as a GM with all of the functional, organizational jobs within that, but again, siloed. But the third stage that we speak about in this conversation, the third stage of sales and marketing, is really getting 75% of that channel function into the organization, reporting to the chief revenue officer. And so we talked about some of the success factors that go into TCMA. And you mentioned that it includes a financial component, things like managing MDF, market development funds. You made, the key point that in some large companies, we're talking about a lot of money. It could be a billion with a B. And so it needs to be managed properly. We talked about the challenge of adoption, that in technology alone, the adoption rate of TCMA is low. It's only 17%. That means a lot of companies are leaving money on the table by not embracing the availability of the programs that are available through TCMA. But in other industries like automotive, you said the adoption rate is high. It's in the 90% range. And that one of the biggest reasons for the lack of adoption is companies that have been around for a while, kind of the E-myth syndrome. And so they don't really understand the value of doing a lot of marketing and embracing the TCMA model. But you see things changing as more and more millennials are getting into executive roles in the channel in general. You're seeing a lot of adoption starting to grow, and you even mentioned that you anticipate that the adoption rate will triple or quadruple. The last thing we talked about was that for companies that have a hybrid distribution model, they are familiar with doing direct marketing using a lot of science, using a lot of metrics. However, in the channel world, that hasn't been the case. So when a marketing person is in the C-suite and they're talking about the budget they need, they can talk about the metrics and how they're going to get ROI from their marketing dollar. But without TCMA, that same channel marketing executive can't speak the same language in the C-suite, and TCMA actually allows that executive to have that same level of science in order to produce the same level of marketing ROI. And you even say, Jay, that it can be even a higher ROI using TCMA. So, Jay, I'm going to leave my summary there. Is there anything that you would like to add?
Yeah, the one thing I would add is the tools that we use as marketers, for example, Google and Facebook and some of the large ones, they all favor local business. So where you're paying $10 for a keyword nationally, Larry in the white van in Wichita, Kansas is paying $2 for that exact word. So it's an 80% cost savings getting, to and through Larry to his marketplace. Second is Larry's trusted in that marketplace. So the emails and the social content are going to come from a trusted source, but it's going to be your content, your syndicated content. That click, by the way, goes to your website, which is basically funneled through Larry's. So the advantage of doing local marketing and having Google and Facebook putting you on page one because you're 2 miles away from the customer organically is a huge benefit to vendors and brands. And it has to be for all marketers, direct marketers and indirect marketers, something to really think about, to get to that next level of performance.
And by companies embracing TCMA, they're able to do the marketing that can get them on page one at the local level.
Right. And even if Larry doesn't want to do it or doesn't want to learn the skills, you can still do it for Larry or do it on behalf of Larry. And this is the opportunity that marketers should be thinking about.
Terrific. Thank you for that additional point. Jay, where would you like to send my listener to connect with you online and learn more about what you've got going on at Forrester?
Yeah, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, Jay McBain, Jay, McBain, McBain. I'm on Twitter, letter J, McBain, on Twitter. My email is jmcbain, the letter J again, McBain@Forrester.com. Any which of those areas, I'll get back to you right away.
Fantastic. Well, Jay, thank you so much for this enlightening conversation here today on this episode of the Modern Marketing Engine podcast.
All right. Thank you so much.
This wraps up another inspiring episode of the Modern Marketing Engine podcast. If you want to share this podcast with a friend, let them know that we're available on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Podcasts. And we love 5-star reviews. If you are not subscribed yet, please hit the subscribe button on your favorite podcast player so you don't miss an episode. You can read the show notes for each episode at vengresso.com. While you're there, sign up to receive the show notes delivered to your inbox through our weekly alerts. And be sure to also check out our Selling with Social podcast hosted by Vengresso CEO Mario Martinez Jr. Again, you'll find our show notes at vengresso.com. And that's one S in Vengresso. Tune in again next week when Bernie Borges brings you another inspiring interview to help you thrive on your modern marketing journey.